Hello, it's CisVolk. Time to enjoy card making with me. This video is all about the new flower background stamp from CarlaCreates by Vaessen Creative. And even if you love other styles or brands, the techniques and ideas I share can be used with any background stamp in your collection. In this video you will also find many card making tips that you can easily apply to other background stamps as well. It is a beautiful stamp and very practical too, because it extends beyond the edges of an A6 card panel. You can stamp it in many different ways, at the bottom, at the top, at an angle, partly or on a label. It also fits completely on a card panel. And you might think, hey, I have seen that stamp before. And that could be true, because through Craft Emotions this stamp was released before, but in a smaller size. I will show you for a moment. You can see that it was quite a bit smaller, and with that version white borders remain on the card panel. So for those of you who have the older one and use it very often because it is so beautiful, but feel disappointed that it cannot fill a full A6 panel, the new one can do that, and it really is highly recommended. Another difference is that the flowers at the top and bottom are nicely rounded, so you get a beautiful finish when you use it halfway on a card. With the older Craft Emotions stamp, the flowers were cut off at the edges. It is super convenient that it is now available in a larger size at Vaessen Creative, and that you can stamp it in many more ways. I have already made many examples with the older stamp. It is one of my most used and favorite background stamps. In this video I will use the stamp in different ways, and I will also create several different cards with it. And of course I will use the other products from the Bloom and Zoom collection from CarlaCreates by Vaessen Creative. You might be wondering how I am going to stamp with such a large stamp, because I don't have such a large clear block. With a small clear block you can definitely stamp part of the image, but stamping the whole stamp with a small clear block will not work. For that I have two alternatives. For example, you can stamp with a stamping platform. I have the stamping body from Nelly's Choice. You might think that you should place the paper and the stamp in the corner, but you shouldn't do that, because then the thickest part sits in the corner and the lid will not close evenly everywhere. And the stamp will also not sit nicely over the edge of the paper. What I recommend is to place a strip of paper along the side and the top and use that as a template to position your card panel. Then it sits nicely centered and you can stamp over the edges. This way the pressure is distributed more evenly. When the stamp is too close to the hinge side, that side can be stamped thicker than the other side. I'm now going to stamp it with VersaFine Onyx Black ink on a piece of smooth white watercolor paper from Florence. There are so many stamping techniques you can do with such a beautiful stamp, and I can only show a few of them. I will also show you in a moment an alternative way to stamp such a large background stamp if you do not have a stamping platform. It is so convenient that with a stamping platform you can stamp multiple times in exactly the same spot. That way you can ink it up several times and be sure that everything is fully covered. And you can make the stamped image as dark or as light as you like. I am heat embossing this card panel with transparent embossing powder, and I am specifically using tweezers so I do not touch the image and the powder, but also so I do not burn my fingers later. Let the embossing powder fall off the paper from all sides. That way you get a very good coverage. I will use this card panel later to color with distress ink. If you do not have a stamping platform and also do not have such a large clear block, there is still a way to stamp the large background stamp. You can simply leave the stamp on the acetate sheet, then you apply your ink to the stamp. Next, you place your chosen paper on top of the stamp. In my case, it is the same watercolor paper again. You can now gently press the paper down with your fingers. Try to apply even pressure everywhere. It can be tricky to keep the paper still because it can shift very easily and then the image will not turn out nicely. You will probably get inky fingers as well. But it doesn't matter if ink gets on the back of the paper because you will glue this onto a folded card later anyway. If you have a brayer, you can also use that and apply even pressure over the stamp and the paper. And when you carefully lift the paper off, you will have almost the same beautiful result as with the stamping platform. And of course, you can heat emboss this one as well. For the next impression, I'm using Versamark ink, which is a transparent ink. And for that, I want my stamp to be very clean. With just water and a microfiber cloth, I clean the stamp thoroughly. I'm again using smooth white watercolor cardstock from Florence. It is watercolor paper that is very smooth on both sides. And if you look very closely, one side is even smoother. If you do not leave fingerprints on it and take the sheet straight out of the packaging, a powder tool is not necessarily needed. I'm stamping this image several times again to get good ink coverage. My ink pad is old and it has become a bit dirty and the stamp did not get completely clean, so you can see a slightly grey impression now. But I will go over this with white pearlescent embossing powder. And then you will not see that impression anymore. I'm using silver pearl embossing powder from Ranger, but you can also simply use white embossing powder. The technique I'm going to do can actually be done with any color embossing powder. Just imagine what will happen when you add colors over this. The color will really pop and the lines will stay light in color. I will show the card I made with this next week in a new video. Here you can see both impressions, one with pearlescent embossing powder and one stamped in black with transparent embossing powder. In this video I will use the black one, and next week I will also use both stamped images again in a new video where I make 2 cards. For a third way to use the stamp, I'm going to blend a background with Distress Oxide ink. I'm using the colors Mustard Seed and Crackling Campfire. With the large blending brushes from Vaessen Creative, I can apply the ink very evenly. I'm leaving the bottom left corner white, because I will add a cute image there later. That is also very practical, because I can hold the paper in that corner and avoid fingerprints on the paper and inky fingers. I work from top to bottom and from dark to light. I alternate between the 2 colors, so the colors blend nicely into each other. Then I dry it well with a heat tool. If the paper starts to warp, heat it from the back as well, and it will flatten out again. I place the card panel back into the stamping platform. My paper sticks to a transparent mat that I placed inside, but if you do not have that, you can temporarily secure the paper with a piece of double-sided tape or something similar. Pick up the stamp with the lid of the stamping platform and press out any air bubbles underneath. Then ink the stamp with the same ink colors as the blended background on the card panel. I apply the darker color at the top and ink the lighter color below it. It would have been wiser to start with the lighter color, because now there's orange ink on my ink pad, but fortunately I can easily wipe that off. Because I want the colors to blend into each other nicely, I use the blending brush again. I want to keep the bottom left corner empty and not stamped there, so I do not apply ink to the lower right area of the stamp. Where there is too much ink, I wipe some off the stamp. First with a damp cloth and then with a dry one. Keep in mind that the image will be mirrored. I need to repeat this process once for the best result. So I keep applying or blending ink until the entire panel is stamped evenly everywhere. Finally, I will add a cute stamped image to this. I can still use the ink that remains on the stamp to create another impression on white paper. First I spray some water onto the stamp so it can react with the water and the impression will become more visible, and then I press it onto a piece of watercolor paper. The amount of water you spray determines the level of distress. The more water you use, the more ink will spread out, of course. This is a super easy and quick technique to create a surprising background that you can use later. You can dab off excess water with a tissue or spray even more water for a more diluted effect. I really enjoy experimenting with things like this, and sometimes something fails, but often it is still nice enough to use as a background, especially if the same colors are used in the rest of the card. And that is how the same stamp looks different every single time. To bring the cards to life, I'm going to add a cute image. The sweet caterpillar and butterfly are also from the Bloom & Zoom collection. You will find links to the products in the description. I stamp them on smooth white watercolor paper with VersaFine ink and heat emboss them with clear embossing powder. I color them with Distress Oxide in the colors Mowed Lawn, Twisted Citron and Crackling Campfire. And later I add a little peacock feathers for the caterpillar's eyes and mustard seed for a more cheerful color blend. I cut out the images, leaving a small white border around them. I like that on this card, because it makes them stand out a bit more. Finally, I add a layer of Nouveau Aqua Shimmer on top of the caterpillar and the butterfly for a little extra shine. I also enhance the blended panel by coloring the flower centers with Nouveau Aqua Shimmer. You can immediately see that the Distress Oxide ink reacts again with the water in the Aqua Shimmer brush. There are some really lovely sentiments included with these stamps. You're lovely, of course, stands for you are lovely. And that finishes this first card with the beautiful floral stamp. Let's continue with the black stamped background. I'm going to color it with Distress ink in the colors Stormy Sky, Candied Apple and Fossilized Amber. And I'm truly only using those 3 colors. I'm using a Tombow water brush medium, but you can also use the fine tip. Pick up some blue ink with the brush and make quick strokes from the center of the flower toward the tip of the petal. But do not color all the way to the very end of the petal. Go over all the petals like this. Press a little harder in the center of the flower and then lighten your pressure as you move toward the end of the petal. This will give you a thinner end to the strokes you are making. Turn your paper so your hand always stays in the same position and you can color loosely. Because with a bent wrist or tension, you cannot work in a relaxed way. It does not matter if it does not go perfectly. In the end, you will not notice it if you make a small mistake somewhere. When you have gone over all the flowers, go over them a second time with the same blue ink. But this time, make your strokes slightly shorter. The flowers in the background can be a bit darker in color, so you can even color those 3 times. If you would like a softer blend of the lines, or if you went outside the lines and want to lighten a stroke, or if you want the flowers in the background to look more blurry, then take a clean damp brush and gently move over the ends of the strokes. I do this on most of the flowers, so they look a bit softer. This will pick up a tiny bit of blue ink with your brush and spread it over the white petal. After that, clean your brush well and pick up some red ink. Use this to color a half moon shape at the bottom of each flower center. It does not have to be very neat because we will go over it once more in a moment. Rinse the brush well again, wipe it dry on a piece of paper towel and now pick up the yellow ink. Color the rest of the flower center and also go over the part that you colored red. You will see that the red ink changes into orange, which is of course exactly what we want. Now take some extra red and go over that half circle again. The orange will become more intense and a bit darker. This makes the flower center look more rounded and the color becomes richer. Do not be afraid to ruin it. With a little water you can easily wipe away a small mistake, and once the paper has dried, you can simply add another layer of ink over it. For a cheerful and fresh card, you could leave it like this. But I'm going to use it as a sympathy card, and that is why I'm coloring the entire background with black distress ink. Try to pick up as much ink as possible and mix it with as little water as possible. So keep your brush quite dry on the piece of paper towel and do not mix the ink on your palette. I'm using a Tombow water brush with a fine tip here. And I first try to color the edges and then fill in the center areas. After coloring the first layer, you will quickly see that the ink dries to a grey shade. I would like it to be a bit darker, so I apply a second layer of ink over it. I colored the first layer with Distress ink Black Soot, and for the second layer I used Distress ink Stormy Sky, the same color as the flower petals. I finished this card with a beautiful sentiment from the Bloom & Zoom text stamp set. In gedachten bij jou, which is translated in English, thinking of you. I add a cute stamped bee and color it with the same ink colors that I used for the flowers, so it matches nicely. As a small background piece behind the sentiment, I blended a scrap of paper with the same Distress Oxide ink colors, so that color is repeated again. It actually turned into quite a cheerful sympathy card like this. As I mentioned, I will show you next week how to color the white and the black impression in a different way. And I can already tell you that they will both look very different, but they are made with the same technique. I hope you enjoyed watching again and that you learned something new. Follow me on my socials and use my affiliate links. You can find them in the description below the video. Thanks for watching. I will see you next Monday. Bye bye!